Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda, and we're going to be talking about the books I read in January and see how much I can remember. I am filming this when it's still December, so I don't know exactly how many books I'm going to read for the year, but it's going to be close to 350 to 360 books by the time the year is over. So I'm going back to the first 30 books that I read from January the 1st to January 31st. And we're going to see if I can remember what happens in these books. All right. The very first book that I read, and you will also be able to tell when my genre reading changed. Most of these books are romance, because that is almost all I read before the end of 2020. At the end of 2020, I started the NPR challenge, and that made me start reading nonfiction and fantasy and things like that. So it was definitely things that I had not been exposed to before. So still predominantly romance, but with a few things thrown in. So the first book that I read was Perception by Nicole Edwards. And this was a reread for me. And I only gave it 3.5 stars. I don't know why I decided to reread it. I think it's because I wanted something easy at the beginning of the year to just ease myself in. Anyway, it apparently was not great. And I think that I remember some of the characters, but I might be getting them confused with other things I've read by her. So we're going to say I don't really remember that one. Then we have Junkyard Cats by Faith Hunter. This one was free on Audible when they had that Audible thing at the beginning of the year. And it's a sci-fi. And I remember that this girl was at a junkyard and she was part cyborg, or maybe she was magical. I have no idea what her name is. And I think something blew up at the junkyard. I'm not really sure what happened, so I guess we'll say no. I don't know that one. The next one is Ties That Tether by Jane Igaro. This is a romance, and this one I remember because it had an office. I think it had a love triangle, which I cannot stand, but I think it had a forced love triangle. If I remember correctly, this woman had a one-night stand with this man and she got pregnant, and then he ended up coming to her office and to work, and he was a worker in her office. And it was there was a race issue in here. I think she's from Nigeria and he is from I want to say he's from England, but he might be Canadian. I know he's not American, but I also know that he's white. So I'm not sure. And I think there was issues with some of that because her mom or her parents or somebody wanted her to date this other Nigerian man. So they kept setting her up and she was like, no, I think I'm going to be with this guy. I don't know. I might be remembering a completely different book, but I think that's what I'm remembering. The next book is Heap House by Edward Carey. I for sure remember this. This was one of my first NPR challenges, and it was a fantasy book. And they lived in a house that was built on top of the heaps. And this boy, I don't remember his name, but they're all members of the same family, and it had something to do with items. Everybody got an item, and he could hear the items, and there are only certain people who can hear the items make noises. And I actually read the second book, I think in this same month. Yeah, Falsham was the last book I read in the month, book number 30. And I remember what happened. I'm not going to tell you because it's a spoiler, but I do remember. Book number 5 that I read. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Oluo. I remember this book. Well, I read this because we were doing a discussion about it in a group that I was in. And so I read this one. It was one of my nonfiction. It's also my first 5-star of the year. I remember that one. Janet Ivanovich, 3 to Get Deadly. I have no idea what happened in this one. It's about Stephanie Plum because it's the 1, 2, 3 thing. So I know that Stephanie solved the crime, had some sexual tension with the police officer. I think that's every book in the series. Then I had The Return by Brad Bonney. Let me see what this is. This is a romance. The Return. Do you know that I think I remember this book because it takes place, or part of it is about Dime Box, Texas, which is just outside of Austin. And so they like live in Austin. This has to do with time travel. It's an LGBTQ romance, but it has something to do with time travel. There's a little bit of a supernatural element because people are meeting people, because I said time, not necessarily time travel, but like there is a supernatural element to it. But they keep talking about Dime Box, Texas. And just recently we were coming back to San Antonio after being north. And as we were driving through, I saw a sign that said Dime Box. And I was like, is that a real place? Like, I thought it was made up. And I'm pretty sure it's from this series. I read more than one book from this series, but not in this month. Okay, then we have Power Game by Christine Feehan. This is listed as a fantasy, but it's a fantasy romance, and it's part of her game series, and I've read almost all of those books, and I can't tell you what this one is about or who's in it, but I know the overarching story of that series. Then we have Rebellious River by Lindsay Cross. This is also another romance that is like a Navy SEAL kind of, well, it's a special ops kind of thing. They might not be Navy SEALs, but this one, I can tell you the overarching story, but I don't know specifically what this book was. Then we have Bonanza Girl by Patricia Betty. This was an historical fiction middle grade that we read for school, and I don't know what happens. I don't remember what happens. Then we had from George Clinton. Now, I did not write this whole name of this book. This is a 5-star read. I didn't write this whole name down, so you're going to see the title of the book over here. Let's see if I can get it right. Okay, all I wrote was Brothers Be Like. I know it's Brothers Be Like George. Ain't that funkin' kind of hard on you? Is that it? I hope that that's it. This book blew me away. I read this on my Kindle, and it's George Clinton telling his life story. And I was so amazed. Like, I didn't even know who he was before I picked this book up. I mean, that's not true. I knew there was a musician named George Clinton. That's all I knew. I thought maybe he did like early kind of hip hop stuff, like the Temptations or something like that. But I knew that he was like, I knew his hair was like different colored, and that's kind of all I knew about him. But I learned a whole lot more. And I so want to have a conversation with him. Like, I have so many questions that I want to ask him. I just think it's great. I loved it. I love this book. Then I have Trace of Fear by Lori Foster. This is another romance, and here's what I remember is that the main character's name is Trace. That's all I know. Then I have Dragon's Gate by Lawrence Yep. This is for school too, also historical fiction. This one I definitely remember. It is about the Chinese men and boys who came over to to build the railroad in California, going into California, connecting the east to the west, the railroad. It was a devastating book. Then I read Jake by Kim Grosso. This, again, I know she's one of my old authors. This is another fantasy romance. I know the overarching story of this series, but I don't specifically know. I mean, I know Jake has to be a werewolf. I'm pretty sure he's a werewolf, not a vampire. And that's about all I know. So then we have The Call of the Wild by Jack London. I super did not like this book. This was a classic that we read for school. It was so weird. Okay, then I have That Sounds Fun by Annie F. Downs. And this is a nonfiction book. She puts out about one of these a year, and I just read them all the time. I love her. I think that her books are funny. And also, I always learn something from her books. I pick up something to take away. She is a Christian nonfiction author. Then B is for Burglar by Sue Grafton. This, I don't even remember the detective's name. I just know that A is for Alibi and B is for Burglar, and I don't even remember the other one. C is for Corpse. And I think those are the three that I read, and I haven't read any more of those, nor do I plan to. Mosquito Land by David Arnold. This was one of my top picks for the whole year. It was one of my NPR challenges. I definitely remember what happened, and I loved it. Joan of Arc by Helen Castor. This one was a nonfiction NPR book. There are parts of this that I remember so well because I had heard the story of Joan of Arc, like who she was, where she came from, how she died, but I didn't know the intricacies of it. And this really broke things down, like who was where, who was fighting who, and what side they were all on, and where Joan came from, and the things that happened to her as she was captured and getting ready to be put to death. It was amazing and great. Then I have The Christmas Pact by Vi Keelan. I gave this 5 stars in romance, and I have no idea what this is about. So, apparently I liked it, though. And then I have Falsham, which is the Edward Carey book, part 2 of Heap House that I read at the beginning of the month. So, that is it. I think I did much better than I thought I would after 300 books. Like, I just thought for sure I wouldn't be able to remember things that happened all the way back in those books, and I remember a lot of them. So I call that a win. Let's see. This was all the way back in January. So let's put a snowflake, because in a lot of the world, it's snowing in January. Not where I am, and not where, half of the world is. But for a lot of people, it's snowing in January. So put a snowflake down in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.